Y sigue la salsa con Salsa y José Massó.
Latino, defiende lo tuyo con orgullo. Todos unidos entre amigos, uno para todos y todos para uno. El nombre mío es José Massó con Salsa, la voz de un pueblo nuevo. 45 años de patria y cultura. On March 31st, 1995, 9-year-old Maria Garcia came home to find her mother glued to the TV, tears rolling down her rosy cheeks. The phone kept ringing. Relatives in Mexico and the United States wanted to know if Maria's family was watching too. American networks and Mexican programming aired the same top story. Selena Quintanilla, the Grammy-winning ascending Mexican-American pop star, had been killed swiftly, violently by the president of her fan club. The story shook the country and changed Maria's life. In Anything for Selena, Maria goes on an intimate, revealing quest to understand how Selena has become a potent symbol for tensions around race, class, and body politics in the United States. The series weaves Maria's personal story as a queer, first-generation Mexican immigrant with cultural analysis, history, and politics to explore how, 25 years after her death, Selena remains an unparalleled vessel for understanding Latino identity and American belonging. Maria Garcia, my dear friend, is one of my colleagues at WBUR. She's a senior editor of arts and culture at BUR, where she leads the artery, overseeing a team of arts writers, reporters, and cultural critics. She was born in Ciudad Juarez and was raised there and in El Paso, Texas, where her family immigrated to when she was 3 years old. She was a broadcast journalist along the U.S.-Mexico border for more than a decade, and she is the host of Anything for Selena, a co-production with Futuro Studios.
If I was somehow asked to say only one thing about the place I'm from, it would be that it has this unforgettable smell when it rains. It's slightly floral, but mostly it's this very specific, cool, earthy desert aroma. And there's usually a calm, clear breeze, which carries these concentrated little pockets of fragrance.
Oh my God, there it is.
The smell comes from the creosote bush, a resilient plant that thrives only in this particularly arid landscape. Especially after a thunderstorm, the creosote bush releases a bunch of these oil compounds into the air, stuff found in citrus, rosemary, pines, and it just smells like the earth exhales. Creosote can live for thousands or tens of thousands of years. It's one of the oldest living things on the planet. And here, this ancient brush grows at the foot of the Franklin Mountains and the valley they nestle below. Cutting through the desert valley is the Rio Grande, dividing two cities and two countries, El Paso, Texas to the north, and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico to the south. This story, my story, long before I became a journalist and moved to the East Coast, begins here.
Well, I remember seeing El Paso from the hill where Mama Nena lived.
This is my brother. He was 5 when I was born.
That was the voice of Maria Garcia. Anything for Selena is the title of the new podcast that will be broadcasting very soon on WBUR. And I want to take a moment to welcome my dear friend, Maria Garcia, who is with us from Texas. Maria, Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. How have you been, my friend?
Happy New Year, Jose. I'm doing very well. Considering the kind of year we all had, 2020 hanging in there, but grateful for 2021 and grateful to be here with you to talk about Anything for Selena.
Well, I am so excited for this podcast because it's so you. I mean, I I was one of the few that got the chance to hear the first two podcasts. And as I was listening to it, I said, that is her. It's all about, oh my God. So we get a sense of the why, but let's expand on that. Why this podcast? Why Anything for Selena?
Yeah, well, so what your listeners just heard a little while ago, the clip you played is the beginning of episode 1. And so I'm introducing the place I'm from, the place that made me, which is the US-Mexico border. I was born in Ciudad Juarez. My parents moved to the States when I was 3 years old. So I grew up, being in Mexico on the weekends and being in the States during the week. The border defined my life. And I grew up believing that I had to sort of divide myself in two. And anytime I was in Mexico or in the US, I felt like half of me was missing. And I thought these two parts of myself were just completely divorced from each other. There was Mary at school and in the world who spoke English, who was American. And then there was Maria at home who spoke Spanish and was Mexican. And when I was 7 years old and I discovered Selena, she really was the very first person who I saw who embodied these two parts of myself in a way that was joyful, in a way that came without shame, in a way that celebrated parts of my identity that it felt at the time the world was trying to deride or to tell me that I should, that they weren't good enough. And Selena was enough in both places, in the US and Mexico. And to 7-year-old me, that meant that maybe I could be enough. And so Selena has become the sort of touchstone in my own life from the time I was 7 till, she died when I was 9, and then growing up in sort of her legacy and being now 35 and realize that for the last quarter century or longer, for my entire life, I've been thinking about why she matters. I've been thinking about why she was so pivotal for me, why she was so important for me, and why I'm not alone, why a lot of people feel this way about her. And so the podcast is a 9-episode anthology. It's a personal story about me and Selena. We go deep into her story, but we also go deep into her legacy and what she can show us about finding our place in this country and about belonging here.
Wow. In doing this, though, you didn't do it from the, studio at WBUR. You traveled back to El Paso. You traveled back home, and you actually got to meet some of the figures around Selena's life, including her father. Tell us a little bit about that part of your journey of, again, rediscovering yourself at this 25 years after her death. You 25 years older, and now Selena and who she is and what she means, not only to you, like you said, but to others, but that journey going back home and connecting with all these folks.
Yeah. So, I knew that if I wanted to make the podcast that I had to secure something from her family, specifically her father, and not just an interview. And I don't want to give it away for the people who haven't listened to the podcast. So I knew that I had to really in good faith tried to meet her father and try to spend time with her family because I wanted to understand Selena not just as a person, not just as the icon, but as a woman, as a daughter, as a sister, as a real person. And I knew that to do that, I had to go back to Texas, and I had to go to Corpus Christi, where she was from, and I had to spend time with her family. And as a Selena fan all of my life, I had very complicated feelings about her father. He has a reputation as a gruff man, as an alpha male, as sort of a short-fused, possessive, controlling person. He was portrayed like that in the Selena movie with Jennifer Lopez 23 years ago, and he was portrayed like that in the recent Netflix series. And so I had very complicated feelings. I thought he was a little scary, and I was going to Texas without really knowing if he would see me because he hadn't agreed to an interview. I went back to Texas without really knowing what, if he would even meet with me. And so you hear through the podcast sort of my journey with him, my journey, understanding who she was as a person, understanding that she was more complicated as a human being that I think she's been portrayed. And so it's, and it was also just like a journey for me to come back to, the state that helped define me, and to come back in a point in my life where I was so reflective about, all of these things about my identity, my race, and to come back and sort of confront those things while also discovering Selena's legacy was just a really profound experience.
It must have been. So you speak about going back to Texas. Texas, of course, was one of the states in the epicenter of everything politics in 2020 for so many different reasons. And even now, as we begin the new year, especially around the presidential election. So touch on this journey of yours in which Selena is the central figure. You, of course, are the kin to Selena because you're rediscovering yourself. But now you're doing it in a period of time in which Texas has changed in many ways that what the Texas was 25 years ago. And yet there's still a resistance, if you will, from the status quo not to be inclusive of that growing Mexican-American, Latino community, immigrant community. Speak a little bit about that in context to the podcast of Anything for Selena.
Yeah, well, in the podcast, we really dig deep and investigate why Selena has become this potent symbol for even political ideology, for social causes, and to just give you an example, and to me, it goes far beyond Texas, but just to give you an example of sort of the two opposites of this, there was a concert that I went to in Central Park called Selena for Sanctuary. And what it is, it's a concert to raise awareness about immigrant rights, about immigrant resources, about defunding ICE and abolishing ICE. And it uses Selena as a symbol to sort of galvanize around these causes precisely because her image has become a sort of shorthand for an entire American experience for sort of for Latinidad. And so, Selena for Sanctuary uses her image for that. So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have Latinos for Trump, who purposely held a demonstration in a Latinos for Trump rally at the Selena Memorial, at her statue in Corpus Christi, precisely for the same reason, because she represents, again, this American experience. She represents sort of, she is a major symbol of American Latino identity in this country. And so to use her as a symbol for a political or a social cause can really mobilize and galvanize people. And so we see that people on either sides of the spectrum attempt to do that to this day. I mean, that's how potent her symbolism still is. Yeah.
That is telling how she could be co-opted, if you will, by both sides in the sense of, no, she's mine. No, she's mine. No, she's mine. No, she's mine. You've gone through this experience. The podcast, by the way, is not just an initiative that comes out of WBUR, because there's a story behind the fact that it's a collaboration. Talk a little bit about that collaboration.
Yeah, it's so exciting. So when we at WBUR started thinking about this podcast, we got word through the grapevine, through the public radio grapevine, i.e. through NPR, that Futuro Studios, which is the podcasting arm for Futuro Media, which is a nonprofit company founded by the wonderful Mexican-American journalist Maria, José, they were also exploring a Selena podcast. And so, we met up in good faith and we said, this is what we're thinking of. And they were like, wow, this is what we're thinking of. And we realized it was kind of a match made in heaven. And it's really, really unique to have two organizations, two, journalism institutions come together in a true editorial partnership. Like this is, both of us are doing the reporting. And what's really exciting about it is we're releasing Spanish language episodes as well. Simultaneously with the English episodes, and they're sort of conversational companions to the narrative English episodes. And no podcast has ever done that, to our knowledge, to speak in these, to both of these audience in the same podcast feed, in the same podcast. And so that's really exciting, and also validating for me because, as I was just saying, I grew up on the border. My Spanish, it's more of a Spanglish. It's I'm what we call in this part of the world a porcha, which is initially was sort of a derogatory term that Mexicans use for Mexican Americans who they feel have sort of defiled the language with their working class Spanglish, but it's sort of been reclaimed. And in these Spanish language episodes, it's me, it's a pocha, like doing my best and speaking the Spanish that I know, knowing that there are so many Latinos like me who sound like me. And, our language may not be completely from there, completely from here, but it's whole, it's complete. And so it merits also like its own episodes. And so I'm really excited about that too. Yeah.
No, I congratulate you and our colleagues at BUR for making this happen. So a few things that come to mind, speaking about language. The first thing is that this Selena's story is not just a Mexican story, Mexican-American story. It's a Latino story for all of us, right? Regardless if we're Puerto Rican, Cuban, whatever. I mean, all of us were impacted by Selena. Many of the young folks went to see Selena when she came to Boston, and they weren't Mexican. They were everybody, right? Colombian, Venezuelan, and it was Selena, right? The role in the movie, of course, was J-Lo playing the role in the movie. But it's not just a Mexican or Mexican-American story. It's for all Latin Americans. Second, it's not just a Latino-centric story in the sense that if you are non-Latino, you're not going to be interested, because there are many, 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 many who would be just as interested to hear this story as they would be to hear the story of any pop star that you can think of at this moment, or any young pop star who has passed away. Speak a little bit about that audience as well, the audience that you are looking to share this with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're totally right about, that it's not just a Mexican American story. This is a story about Latino identity and the evolution of Latino identity in the last quarter century in the United States. And in fact, I'll give you a sense of sort of like where we're going with this. One of the theories that we have in the podcast, and where our cultural analysis and our journalism has led us to, is to this idea that Selena, again, has become this shorthand for an entire experience and has become a symbol of Latinidad, of what it means to be Latino in this country, and to, what it looks like and sounds like to be Latino. And then if Selena did that, then J-Lo's portrayal of Selena in 1997 really catapulted Latinos to this other sort of market, this sort of demographic, this constituency to cater to. And we look at this very specific point in history in the mid-90s that changed the way we think about Latinidad. But we do it in a way that's a little different. And what we do is, this may sound trivial, but it's not. We look at the history of the butt. A big butt culture, and we go into the episode saying that there's a direct historical lineage between Selena and sort of the mainstreaming of big butts 25 years later. But that story is not just about the way our body, our sort of the body politics in the United States has changed in the last quarter century. That story is about Latinidad and Blackness, and how Latinidad as an identity has formed while sort of glorifying some Latinos and erasing others, particularly Black Latinos, and where Selena and J-Lo sort of fall in this point in history. I won't give it away. There's a lot there, but so yeah, so it is about Latino identity. It's not just about Mexican American identity. And in terms of like, why would this appeal to somebody who was not Latino? I mean, ultimately, this is a human story, and yes, we go deep on sort of like historical analysis, cultural analysis, but really, 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 this is a very, very personal journey for me in discovering Selena, in sort of rediscovering myself. And I think there are very human themes that it doesn't matter if you're Latino or not that are going to resonate with you. Themes about fatherhood, themes about loss. Episode 2, which you listened to, Jose, is all about me getting to know Abraham Quintanilla, Selena's father, while really carrying with me this gaping loss and grief for my own father, and sort of navigating that loss while getting to know Selena's dad, and that sort of triggering in me this deep exploration of like fatherhood. And so very human themes that doesn't matter if you're Latino or not are going to resonate with you for sure.
No, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to hear all of the episodes. So let's give the information again. When does it start and how often will it play?
So we launched January 13th. You can subscribe anywhere you listen to your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere. We will release episodes every Wednesday, and starting on January 13th, we're going to release the first 2 episodes. So join us, and then every Friday after that, we're going to have sort of some Instagram lives on @Selena_podcast on Instagram, sort of like an after party after the episode airs to sort of like wind down and hear from people to hear what they thought about the episode. Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be successful. I think people are going to respond. I imagine the episode you were speaking of where you look at the physiology, right? The physique of both a comparison, Selena and J-Lo and others during the last 25 years. There'll be a number of fans of the great Iris Chacon who will lean in and also speak about that period of time in which she was a very popular symbolic figure in music and culture and dance.
Yes.
She was called a vedette because she more dancing and singing, sort of like a version of what you would say J-Lo and Selena had. But I'm pretty sure that will get some folks to really start putting all those things into a web, right? A connection of a connectivity.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you at least explore that. But I am so happy for you. I'm happy for all of the fans of Selena and others. I think it's going to bring another generation of folks to really re-examine her because, I'm thinking we've seen a movie. There was a series just recently on Netflix. What did your journey uncover that both of those may be glorified or even passed over?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that first of all, Selena's relationship with her father. I think that both in the movie and in the series, we get this picture of a very demanding, exacting father manager who's, controlling of his daughter, and we get sort of a jovial but nonetheless sort of like submissive daughter. And I think the podcast takes a much deeper look at that dynamic. And And also like her contribution in music, and like what a true artistic vanguard she was. I don't think that there has been something that truly does her justice that way. And then I think even most importantly, like she changed culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like she changed American culture.
Mm-hmm.
And there hasn't been a true capturing of that. And I'm hoping that the podcast will do that. Yeah.
So the Maria Garcia that I'm looking at this moment, and the Maria Garcia who walked in on her parents on the day which was announced her demise or killing. Looking back at that young girl, who is she today?
Wow, that's a profound question, Jose. I think that girl is a woman, a queer woman, who has realized that ultimately what Selena taught us, the reason she was so inspiring is not that she ascended, even though it seems like at first that's the reason we feel so connected to her, is because she rose to these levels that at the time, it was so unheard of for a Mexican American, a working class Mexican American to reach. And she did it without compromise, right? She did it while holding on to her roots and her identity. She was explicitly Mexican American. She talked about that. But really, to me, I've realized from this journey that that's not the real reason I love her. The real reason I love her is because she ascended while being grounded. She was here on earth with us. She was a living being who was connected to the place of the world she was from, to her heritage, to her roots. She knew who she was. And so to me, like that, I'm now, the woman who's realized that I don't have to go anywhere to discover who I am. That's within myself. And I think that Selena taught me that.
A great journey. I love it. And I'm looking forward to hearing it every Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, right there. Anything for Selena, the podcast with my dear friend, Maria Garcia, who will be the host of this great endeavor. And the total number, remind me again, it's a total of 9 that we'll be hearing?
Yes. So 9 episodes with possibly like a 10th bonus episode. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And congratulations. And I'm so excited for you. I'm excited for everyone because I think this will break new ground for all of us. And in particular, the collaboration with Futuro. I think that is a milestone. So thank you for putting that together, all of you who worked on this. And again, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Jose. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure, my blessings to have you and to see you. We miss seeing each other in person. That's part of COVID-19. But who knows, maybe 2021 will give us that opportunity. But stay safe there in Texas, and we will be all enjoying Anything for Selena. My dear guest, Maria Garcia, on this beautiful day. And she is the host, as I said before, of the podcast, Anything for Selena, starting this Wednesday. We're going to continue right here. My name is José Massó con Salsa, the very best in Afro-Latin music. 45 years de lo mejor, nuestra música afroantillana, la voz de un pueblo nuevo con salsa. Mi invitada especial, Maria Garcia, anfitriona del podcast Anything for Selena, en español y también en inglés. Así que tienen la oportunidad de escuchar a María sobre el tema de la gran Selena. Chao. Much blessings to you, my friend. Be well. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.